Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest in our series of live careers webinars on the Hertfordshire Opportunities Portal. That's HOP, powered by the Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership. My name is Gareth Dace, and I work for Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership. As an organisation, we are working with 106 schools across Hertfordshire to try and increase young people's knowledge of different careers, sectors, and the opportunities that are available to you. Today's webinar features engineering, and I'm delighted that we've got two excellent panelists with you today who can share some of their knowledge and experience with you. I'll formally introduce both Matthew Dickenson, you want to give a wave, Matthew, yeah, and John Millar from Osborne Construction. I'll introduce them very shortly so they can tell you a little bit more about themselves and introduce themselves. Just a bit of housekeeping for you all first of all. So firstly, just to reassure you, we can't see or hear any of you, but hopefully you can see and hear us. This session is being recorded and it will then be placed onto our YouTube channel, which I'll make sure all your teachers are aware of, so that if you want to watch that, share it with your family or friends so as well. You can, however, interact with both Matthew and with John. So there's two ways of doing that by asking questions. What I suspect you'll be most likely to do is to ask a question over text. On the dashboards that you should all have on your screens at the moment, you'll see there is one there which says questions. So if you click on questions, it will bring out a box, and then you can type within that box a question that you would like to ask. If you want to ask a question specifically to Matthew or to John, just make it clear that you want to ask the question to Matthew or John specifically. Following feedback that I've had in previous weeks, I won't say your name, so if you've asked the question, it will tell me who you are, but I won't reference your name on there. Just that's what people have preferred to do. So any questions that come in will only be visible to me. They won't be visible to the rest of the attendees. I may not ask your question immediately when it comes in, because I might know that there's a question that's coming up that will be linked to it, but my intention is that every question that you ask will be forwarded on to Matthew and to John and will be referenced as well. So I really do want to encourage you, because we will cover a number of different things within engineering and careers within it as well, but your questions are the most important. They're far more important, and there'll be better questions than anything that I've come up with, and they'll be more personal to you as well. So please do ask the questions. If you're feeling very brave, you can actually ask the question over audio. So you should see that one of the other tabs on your dashboard will be a hand. So it looked like a hand. If you click on that button, that will alert me to the fact that you want to ask a question over audio. If you want to do that, put your hand up, I'll acknowledge that, and then at the next interval that we have, or next opportunity we have, I will actually take you off mute so you can ask your question. But just to reassure you, all of you are on mute at the moment. The other thing, now we're trying this today for the very first time. We're going to have some polls that will come up on the screen as well. So this will be just trying to understand from you how useful this session has been. A couple of introduction questions I want to ask you now. This is really just for a test for me as much as anything else. Just putting a question up on the screen at the moment, which is just asking how easy it was for you to register for this webinar and log in. The fact that you are registered and you are logged in at the moment probably suggests to me that it was okay. But if you would just like to have a go at doing that now, I'll leave that open for a few more seconds, and there'll be a couple of more of these that will come up as well. They are totally anonymous, by the way, so it won't tell me which of you are saying, which of you are giving which answers. You will also be sent an evaluation after the session as well, so that will come in via your teachers, and that just to help us to understand whether you've enjoyed the session, whether you found it useful, so we can make sure that any subsequent ones that we do will be really beneficial for everyone. Right, I can see a lot of you have answered that one at the moment. I'm just gonna close that poll, so if you've not answered it yet, don't worry about it. And that is just information that we will collect as we go through. So I will very shortly introduce you to Matthew and to John. Before I do that, though, I just want to tell you why we're talking about engineering, why engineering has come up today. Obviously, it's a subject area or a career opportunity that all of you that are attending are interested in finding out about today. But it's really, really important to us within the county of Hertfordshire to promote engineering, because engineering is one of our key employment sectors that we know there is going to be an increasing number of jobs available in over the next few years. In fact, in 2015, £3.5 billion was contributed to the Hertfordshire economy from engineering firms. Hertfordshire is a real hub of engineering, or we like to consider that we are as well. The first production of a commercial jetliner took place in Hatfield. And then in Stevenage, some of you may be aware that Airbus is based there. Now, Airbus are currently working on a project that will send a rocket onto the surface of Mars as well. So engineering is something that has got a home in Hertfordshire. 26,600 people were employed within the industry in 2015 as well. So I'm going to hand it over to our two experts here. So Matthew, if you could just give us a little introduction to you and the company that you work for, please.
Yeah, I am Matt. I work for AECOM in St Albans. I am a mechanical engineer there, and we're a construction kind of company. So I do mostly working on buildings, especially like ventilation and heating for office and residential buildings, mostly in London, but also across the UK and across Europe as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And John, if you could just give us an introduction to yourself and to Osborne Construction.
Yeah, my name is John. I'm a project manager. I work for Osborne Civil Engineering. We do other construction work as well, like house building and maintenance work, but we're primarily a construction company building roads and bridges and railway infrastructure. We employ about 800 direct staff, and we're nationwide.
Okay, fine. That's a good introduction for both of you, and I think just to cover this, there'll be a lot of crossover, I think, between engineering and construction. So engineering is an essential element of the construction industry. We're really going to be focusing on the engineering aspects of that today through both Matthew and through John. If construction is something that you're interested in finding out about, though, the webinar we'll be doing in 2 weeks' time, which actually will include one of John's colleagues, will specifically think about construction as an industry. But so today is more about engineering. Matthew, you said that you're a mechanical engineer, so can you tell us what actually is a mechanical engineer, and what are the different types of strands of engineering that someone might go into?
Okay, so I think this question is quite tricky because most engineering is very specific, but broadly speaking, I'd say there's kind of three main types. There's like mechanical engineering, which is all to do with movement. So I'd say that includes stuff like if you like cars and you want to design cars, or to even like toasters, like the mechanical moving elements of a toaster's mechanical engineering, to what I would also include like structures and civil in there, because it's all about not moving, which uses the same maths and theory behind it. I specifically work in doing services. So I'm looking at how can we get air from the outside to the inside to make sure it's not too stuffy in the room, there's fresh air coming in, it's at the right temperature. But you also then get electrical engineers, who I'd say are more theory based on electricity and programming and that kind of aspect. And then you also get, I would say, chemicals, the other main ones. That's stuff like bioengineering, if you like GM crops, or coming up with new materials. That kind of more chemistry based engineering is what I'd say the other sector is. But again, it's not like defined categories, because if you really like, I don't know, computers, there's like software engineering, or there's electronic engineering, if you like doing the components. There's all sorts of different avenues that you can go in that are very specific, especially if you're looking at a degree. There's a lot of broader ones like mechanical, or more specific if you know exactly what you want to go into.
Yeah, okay. And perhaps, John, could you talk about the civil engineers that you would be working with? What's that strand of engineering? What does that look like?
So yeah, as Matt said, there's many different strands of engineering. It is a very broad topic and a broad career. But in construction, we'll say civil engineering, and Matt's company deals with this as well. It is fundamentally about designing bridges, designing roads, designing infrastructure. railways, dams, anything like that that is going to be built, engineers have to design it. We also have to design the way things are built. That's called temporary works, sort of cranes and piling rigs and scaffolding and all these things. That's another strain. Beyond that as well, we have engineering surveying, which works with measurements and quantities of we call it setting out. So you survey the land and you put marks down for where roads and bridges are going to be built. So that's a very IT based strand of engineering. And we also have engineers who look after quality control and look after actual construction detailing. So it's all around those sort of disciplines where construction engineering is a career.
Yeah. There's two questions that have come in already, actually, which link into this topic of defining the different sort of strands of engineering. So I've had a question: what is design engineering about? I don't know whether one of you could have a crack at answering that one. Matthew looks prime, so
okay. Well, design engineering is kind of like when you're doing construction, when you come up with the design before the construction, at least this is how I view it. It is coming up with the drawings that then someone will follow to you're basically creating an IKEA flat pack manual for a building, in that you need to specify what everything is, where it goes, how much of everything you need, and coming up with the actual design of where all the elements go.
Yeah, that's a great description. That's a great description. Yeah.
Okay, I hope that was useful for the person who asked that question. Another question here, and I'm going to throw this one at you again, Matthew. First of all, which type of engineering earns more money, and which type does more risky work?
Ooh, that's tricky. I wouldn't know which earn more money. It's about finding what you enjoy, I would say, more, because if you can get higher up in engineering, then obviously there's more money. But I'm not sure I'd know of which engineering specifically is better. I know it's very location based as well. So for example, I know in Australia, stuff like geotechnical engineering is a lot more valuable because they do a lot of work with mining over there than over here. But it's all about, I mean, I'd say you'd have to look on some kind of website to know exactly which would earn you the most. But it's better to go something you're passionate about, because you're going to go further in that career and then earn more money that way, rather than something you kind of half care about and then you just coast.
Sure. Okay. I mean, being an engineer, I think in whichever strand you do is a highly skilled profession, and generally that dictates that the salary would be reflected within that. A few more questions that are coming in. Thanks for these questions. These are really great, by the way. I'm really pleased that you're asking them. Had a question that I guess this relates to your description about design engineering. Is it like architecture? I mean, clearly there are some parallels there, aren't there?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I mean, architecture and concept design. This is what architects do. They're more artistic people. They do images of how they want something to look, how it's going to operate. Engineers tend to do the flat pack side of it. They take that concept and turn it into reality, and they do all the maths and all the design behind that.
Okay, that sounds like a good answer. Okay. Another question here: would you say that mechanical engineering, and this is a slightly loaded question if you are a mechanical engineer, Matthew, would you say mechanical engineering is more technical than chemical engineering?
Ooh, I mean, I wouldn't want to pick sides, but I would say yes, obviously. But I really don't think there's that much difference in technicality, because it's all about like how involved and deep you want to go. So if you're really into chemical engineering, I'm sure that can be a very focused, in-depth topic if you want to go that way. And the same with mechanical or any other type of engineering.
Yeah, no, okay. we asked the one about which one earns the most sort of money and which one's the riskier work. What are some of the best civil engineering projects each company has worked on? Well, let me ask you that one, John.
So if I answer a little question before that, engineering in this country is starting to go really up the salary scale. I mean, the country is desperate for engineers, so we talk about money first. It's a great career to go into, and the sky's your limit if you're interested and you're good at it. So that's the first thing. I've done some really, really good, interesting projects that are very high risk as well. Things like I put a 1,500 ton bridge over a railway with live trains running underneath. So that was described as I'd describe that as probably the most technical, challenging and risky job I've ever done. We've lifted bridges with 1,000-ton cranes in an hour over live railway lines and motorways. So it's really high-end engineering.
Yeah. In my company for civil engineering, I know that we've worked on quite a few of what I would assume are some of the bigger projects at the moment. So I know there are people working on Thames Tidalway, which is the new big sewer under London. I know we've got people looking at Lower Thames Crossing, which is the new replacement for the Dartford crossing that they're looking at building. We've got people who work on HS2 and Crossrail. So I know I'm not as familiar with that side of the business, with the more civil and like infrastructure side, but I know AECOM does get involved with lots of the projects over that way as well.
Okay. And then maybe just tell us a little bit more about your company. So AECOM, you're based in St Albans, that's your office. But how wide, perhaps across the country, are the projects that your company is currently working on? We may have just lost Matthew for a moment there, but John Smith. So from Osborne's perspective, I mean, we've got some of the students that are on here today. I know live in Broxbourne and go to some schools down here, and you obviously got a very big project there in Hoddesdon at the moment. What are perhaps your other big projects locally that you could talk about?
Okay, so we run pretty much the whole of the M25 maintenance wise. So we're out there almost every night of the week. You wouldn't know because it's sort of from midnight through till 4 in the morning, keeping that motorway running. We've got other contracts in Hertfordshire, Essex County Council, all the way around London, to be honest. Probably about 6 or 7 offices across the country. My office is in Hatfield, for example. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've obviously just lost Matthew for a moment. I'm sure he will be back very, very quickly. So some more questions that are coming in, John, that you will be able to answer.
Yeah.
Are there many opportunities to be entrepreneurial with engineering?
That's an interesting question. Probably, but you need to learn your industry first, let's say. It's like anything, you've got to be skilled at what you do. It's good to have that entrepreneurial get up and go, but you've got to learn the basics first, I'd say, to then make it a meaningful career on your own. There are companies who set up on their own, but it's very specialist. You have to find a niche to make your business work.
For sure. I mean, that's obviously true of any business or any industry, isn't it? So I think it's really important that you, as you said, that you develop that really sort of specialist knowledge first of all before you look to go into it. Matthew, you're back with us.
Sorry about that. My internet went down.
Okay. That's okay. That's quite all right. Matthew, throw a question straight back at you that's just come back in there. I mentioned in my introduction about Airbus. And the question that's come in is, what type of engineering involves spacecraft and satellites?
So that would mostly be aerospace engineering that would be kind of dealing with that kind of subject. But I would assume stuff like mechanical, where it's a bit broader, you could also quite easily go into that kind of field as well.
Yeah. Okay. I should say a lot of the answers to these questions are available to everyone using a website that I've mentioned earlier called HOP, which is www.hop, H-O-P, which stands for Hertfordshire Opportunities Portal, HOP into, and that provides lots of career and labour market information. There is a directory on there about pretty much every job that you can think about, and it will also tell you about the key sectors within Hertfordshire that we are looking to try and promote, of which engineering is one of them on there. I'm just going to put another poll up there. I'd just be interested to know how many of you have ever used the HOP website before, and it's perfectly fine to say no, that you've never heard of it. So that poll's just open up there now. So if you wouldn't mind answering that question, if it's accessible to you, that would be great. Next question that I have is, well, this is about chemical engineering. What are the possible careers for chemical engineering? So typically, what might a chemical engineer do, Matthew?
I would say mostly chemical engineering is about creating new substances, whether that be for pharmaceuticals or for like plastics or something like that. I'm not that familiar, and I have a friend from university who did chemical engineering, so he's really going to hate that I probably haven't sold it very well. But from what I understand, it's more that way.
Yeah. Is there much rivalry between different strands of engineers? I mean, we'll talk about your university experiences in a moment, but there's another question there. What would you say is the most enjoyable? Brackets, don't be biased. I guess you can only be biased to the one that you know about.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, again, I really find buildings really interesting and how you can make them more sustainable and use less energy and all of that kind of stuff. So I find my degree really interesting. In terms of which is best, I'm not sure I'd be able to answer. And I'm not sure I'd be able to say if there's much rivalry. I feel like there is once you get into the industry, because you're kind of like, you want to get your way. You want to make sure that your duct goes where you want your duct to go, and this structural guy wants to put his beam in the way. But I think everyone's relatively nice when it comes to the rivalry.
No, okay, it's fairly healthy, constructive rivalry. I've got another question on chemical engineering again, which you're answering these very well, Matthew, based on some of your friends and people in your engineering network. On the topic of chemical engineering, does that link to genetic engineering, bioengineering, such as CRISPR?
Yes. So CRISPR, I believe, is to do with gene splicing, I believe, and creating like genetically modified crops and animals and stuff. So I'd say it's a similar field, but I believe it's more, you'd be looking at better at going something more specific if that's what you're really interested in. Something like genetic engineering or bioengineering or marine engineering, or I'm sure there's 100 different degree courses out there that focus on stuff like gene sequencing and that kind of stuff.
I think there's a really good point being made here about sustainability and the environment. I mean, what you've just touched on there, Matthew, that's across all engineering now. It's a fundamental part of engineering is sustainability and the environment. So all the strands of engineering you talked about will have that aspect to it.
Yeah. And then a question specifically about mechanical engineering. With mechanical engineering, can you do other types of engineering, and what types? So I guess, is there a broader strand of engineering that perhaps if you go into to start with, you could then branch out into others, or would you find that they were so completely separate you'd almost have to retrain? Is there a really good base area to start from, Matthew?
Yeah, I would say mechanical or electrical are generally quite broad, and you can generally apply what you learn in those to more specific areas. So, for example, you might want to do more like aerodynamic engineering for cars, but if you do mechanical, you'll have some aerodynamic background, and you'll also then get some fluid dynamics and lots of other stuff. So if you're not really sure what you want to focus on or specialize in, I'd say that's definitely the way to go. At least in my company, lots of mechanical engineers that we have come through a broader mechanical engineering route than being focused into building services.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fine. There's more questions coming in. There's some really, really good questions, by the way. Actually, these are far better than the ones that I'd prepared beforehand. It's great. I'm going to ask this one to you, John, to start with. What would be the average timescale for a project you would be working on, e.g., how long it takes from beginning to end?
That's interesting. It really can vary. A big project like HS2 Crossrail can take 15 years, a really long gestation, a lot of design engineering. I mean, HS2 has been talked about for decades, to be honest, and it will take probably a decade to build. So that's the extreme end. Middle range projects, a year or two, and some projects can literally take weeks. It really does depend. They're bunched into what's called frameworks nowadays, where there's multiple schemes are put under one banner in construction.
Yeah.
Okay. And how does that compare to you, Matthew? I mean, for you, the projects you're working on perhaps aren't as tangible as some of the ones that John's described.
Yeah, we have some similar size. I know that we've had, like, because we can range from like a small extension to a hotel that will be done in like 3 or 4 months to a lot bigger scale. I know the project I've been working on, it's a multi-phase development, which we work on quite frequently, where especially for like a collection of apartment blocks, they'll build like a couple first and then they'll build the next set. And when you're doing a development like that, you could easily, from the start of concept design to the final block being finished, it could easily take 10+ years at that point.
Yeah. Okay. And then a question connected to that one. When designing things like a bridge, so let's take the one in Hoddesdon that you're doing, which I know some people they will drive past this or go past this quite regularly at the moment. How's the time divided between the designing, planning, and the actual building of it? So so let's say the bridge was going to take 2 years to build, how much time would have been spent designing and planning it in advance of putting the shovel in the ground for the first time?
A really good question, that. So the project that I'm on specifically is 15 months building. I'd been working on it for at least a year before that, planning it all, and helping the designers, planning temporary works and things like that. And I think the council would be working on it probably 4 years before that. It's a long time to get through planning and iron out land agreements, which is buying the land to build things on. So it's a job that takes about a year to build, could take 5 years in the planning. So a long time.
Yeah. Okay. And for you, Matthew, the same question?
Yeah, I would say, like, well, from our perspective, we focus a lot more on the design side. We do have, when stuff goes into construction, we usually do send some engineers on site to make sure everything's going okay. And we also deal with drawings being sent back to us with queries or comments for us to check. But I would say most of it is done like a solid, yeah, I'd guess like 70% is done in the design phase, and then the construction will only take, again, it depends on the scale of the building. If you're building like a big skyscraper or something in London, it might take multiple years to do that construction work, but most, I would say, is majority design work.
Okay, all right. I'm going to touch on this one, will probably be specifically aimed at you, Matthew, this section of questions, but it's thinking about the subjects that you chose at school and why you chose certain subjects, and the subjects that have really helped you, and I'll extend that into the degree that you're doing as well, because we've had a lot of questions about this. So could you just talk us through which subjects did you study at school, starting from GCSE, and then just talk us through until you'd chosen your degree course?
Okay, so at GCSE, I had to do maths and English, like I imagine most people had to do. I did triple science, which I assume is still the same. I know GCSEs have changed since I was at secondary school, but I did that. I did geography, I did French, I did statistics, I did graphics, I did a whole range of different degrees because I really had no idea what I wanted to do at that point. I had a kind of a vague idea of, oh, I quite like maths and physics, so maybe I want to do something a bit more sciencey, but that was kind of it. And then when I went to A level, I did maths, I did physics, and I did graphic communication. Because at least from my perspective, I think it's really important to show that you're a well-rounded person. So that's why I didn't want to go all in on the science and the maths. I wanted to have something else that shows, oh, I can be creative, or I can work in a team, or something a bit more than just I do maths. Which obviously you
Yeah.
can get in other ways other than like dedicating one of your A levels to it. But as I enjoyed the graphics so much at GCSE level, I thought I'd carry that on. And for me, I think easily the most important A level I did was maths, if you're thinking about engineering in general. I'm not sure there'll be many like degree courses or even many apprenticeships that would be looking for people who haven't done maths. I think most would say that was a requirement, or at least very beneficial.
Yeah.
So I definitely rate the maths. I really didn't have an idea still, other than vaguely engineering, about what I wanted to do. So I spoke to my careers department at the school, and
Yeah.
they recommended with my spread of A levels that I did architecture. But
Okay.
when I went to some of the architecture open days, like I was, in my opinion, it wasn't heavy enough on the maths. It was all a bit arty and conceptual. But I actually found out through that I actually really enjoyed buildings, and like the aspect of buildings I really enjoyed was making them sustainable. So I
Yeah.
then ended up doing a building services engineering degree at Nottingham, which I found very useful. Taught me all the basics I needed to know.
Yeah. And at what stage during the degree course did you really start to focus in on the mechanical engineering side of it?
So yeah, because my degree course was quite varied, because there's quite a few different strains involved in building services engineering. When you think about building services, it goes from everything from providing the heating and cooling to where are you going to put your electrical plug socket in your room.
Yeah.
And for me, I connected a lot more with the more mechanical side of things, like can we insulate buildings better? Can we provide renewable technologies? What's the best way of designing a building to get it more
Yeah.
efficient? That was the kind of the aspect I was really interested in. And what really clarified that for me was I did a summer placement at the end of my second year,
Yeah.
and I really enjoyed that placement. It gave me a really good grounding for my final year. So after that, I was kind of like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. Oh, okay. We'll talk about apprenticeships in a minute, because I think it's very important to emphasise that to go into engineering, there are very credible routes through either higher education, through getting a
Definitely.
degree, or through going through the apprenticeship programme. But John, typically some of your civil engineers that you work with, what sorts of degrees will they have done?
Yeah, so Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. That's a common route. I did a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management, but that can lead to engineering. So a bit like Matthew, I was at Nottingham University, and there's multiple strains that you can start with, and then you move into a discipline that you enjoy. So I moved into sort of project management rather than pure civil engineering, but I've got a lot of civil engineering colleagues who went that route. I started out actually at college though. I did a national diploma, a BTEC, which I think still exists. So rather than do A levels, I did something
Yeah.
vocational. And I really enjoyed that because it was focused around construction, and I've stayed in that industry ever since. But you can do BTEC straight from school in your sixth form years in engineering. It's a very easy route, and as you say, apprenticeships nowadays are really common and a good, easy access way into the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Matthew, you said about how maths really sort of underpins a lot of the knowledge base that you've got, and is sort of very important if you're seriously considering going into engineering. What are the
Yeah.
other sort of secondary subjects? I mean, I'm guessing they're going to be science related, but which ones in particular do you think sort of resonated with you?
So I would say physics is obviously quite important, but I'd say physics is basically pretty much just applied maths, but it's the same idea of like you need to use, it's not just equations that you're doing. you're trying to figure out ways to use your knowledge to solve a problem, whether that be, can you use interesting shapes? Because for me, that is what I enjoy most about my job. That's what I think is the most important skill you need to have, really, is problem solving and looking at ideas creatively. I'd say it's also very important to show that you're good at like teamwork, especially in the industry. You'll be working with architects and civil engineers and structural engineers and geotechnical engineers and so many different people. It's really important to show that you can work in that team and communicate effectively. It's really important.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, just John, just building from that, we know how important qualifications are in a highly skilled environment like engineering. But what are the sorts of skills those that underpin all those actual qualifications that people who are civil engineers need to have? I mean, Matthew just spoke about problem solving and teamwork, but what sort of person is it that finds themselves capable of going into engineering?
Yeah, good question. So I totally agree with what Matthew said about teamwork. That's a vital part of probably most industries, but engineering, because we work in project teams, you need that teamwork ethic. Communication and IT skills, very important. So if you want to be an engineer, you really do need to be up with the latest technology and IT, which I'm sure lots of young people are. I think you've got to have that drive, interest, diligence, attention to detail. Those sort of things are really important in an engineer as well. It is about specifics and getting things right. So you've got to be able to follow instructions and create instructions that people can follow. So that's what I would say makes a really good engineer.
Yeah,
definitely.
Okay. Matthew, you said you went to Nottingham University. Are there any particular universities that are, considered to be the sort of leaders in providing engineering degrees?
So I'd say it depends on what speciality you want to go into. For example, I know I looked briefly at civil engineering, and I know both Surrey and Bath, I want to say it was, or both at the time were considered really good universities for that. But I would say in the grand scheme of things, stuff like university league tables don't really show what you want them to show. There's really not that much difference for most subjects between like the top ones and then like maybe even up to like 10, 20 down on the table, especially as all are controlled by like a institute of some sort, some kind of professional body. They all teach similar stuff. I'd advise more looking at the courses and the modules that you'll be doing and looking at whether you find those specific modules to be interesting. And then also for universities, what I'd say is quite an important thing is the atmosphere of the university. Do you want a campus or a non-campus university? Do you want a city centre or an outskirts? I'd say that's very important to consider as well.
Sure. Okay. And I'm going to ask you sort of a leading question here, John, but do you have to have a degree to go into engineering?
Absolutely not. No, it's not a necessity. I think if you wanted to do pure engineering, possibly. When I say pure engineering, if you want to be a qualified civil engineer, you probably would need that degree basis behind you, and it'll be the same for Matthew's discipline. But engineering is so wide, I just don't think there's any obstacle to it. Apprenticeship is a great route in. The college route that I took, I've got a very good career following a slightly different route. If you've got talent, that's what's important really nowadays. It's good to have the academics behind you, but your drive, your talent, your enthusiasm is what really counts nowadays.
Yeah, if anything, I would say apprenticeships are almost more valuable than degrees, because that would take you longer to get to that qualified status. By the time you get there, you've got so much experience and knowledge behind you that you're in a much better place than you would be if you were just coming out of university. And a lot of the time anyway, if you get to that stage and you're good and you're showing promise, companies will then offer to help fund or support you through the rest of the way through getting a degree or a master's or whatever you need to become professionally qualified. So I would definitely say if you know what you want to do, apprenticeship is a very strong route to go nowadays.
Yeah, and obviously AECOM, which is based in St Albans, which all of you that are watching this today, won't live too far away. AECOM, you do have an apprenticeship scheme, don't you? And I know a few of your colleagues, Matthew, have come through, and your peers indeed have come through that apprenticeship option instead.
Yeah, definitely. We had unfortunately, this has come out the wrong side of coronavirus. We had a apprenticeship open evening just before lockdown happened. But it's definitely a very valid way to come in. Like all the people I know at the office who have come through that, you wouldn't be able to tell any difference between them and a normal degree graduate.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then in terms of the age that you would recommend going into starting an apprenticeship, I'm guessing most of your peers that you just referred to there, Matthew, have started an apprenticeship after A levels or after sixth form, so probably at 18.
Yeah, I know that's the preference. It's not the rule. I know there have been exceptions made, but the preference is that you have A level in maths and then whatever else you've taken. But I know that they like you to have that grounding, that basics down of how to do the important mathsy bit before they then take you on.
Yeah, okay. Another sort of line of questions, I've had a couple of questions that have come in here, and is engineering gender dominated?
I would say it used to be, but definitely not anymore. At least on my, in fact, on my university course, it was about 70% women, I want to say. I definitely wouldn't say it's gender dominated anymore. I think maybe at the top there's still some issues. We don't really have that many directors that are women at the moment, but I think that's well on its course towards changing. There's definitely a strong push towards getting rid of any bias or anything like that to being a very fair, even company. And I know we've had a lot of graduates come through recently that are women and are having a great time, not feeling pressured or anything at all.
Yeah.
Can I just add? I think it's an advantage at the moment. If you want to come into the industry, companies would be actively looking to employ females, probably just to improve their demographics. I think it's actually a benefit at the moment.
Yeah. Are there particular strands of engineering that perhaps are more male dominated than others?
Oh, I don't know. If I had to guess, I've got no experience in this to know if this is the case. I'd say stuff that is probably more intimidating would probably naturally have fewer females. But obviously, I don't think that's the case to be stuck with that. I think that's just more of the people coming up through the systems still subconsciously have this bias of like, oh, something like nuclear physical engineering to do like nuclear bombs, like that's a perfectly legitimate course for people to take, even though they might not think that. So I wouldn't worry about gender bias at all, really. I don't think employers necessarily consider that, or as John said, if anything, they're looking for women rather than penalising them.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm going to try and start wrapping this up very shortly because we've been going for 45 minutes. There's still some really good questions coming in there, so I want to try and get in as many of those as we can. John, for someone who just wants to finish school at the end of their GCSEs but really wants to go into engineering, what would be your advice for them? What should they be looking to do? Should they be looking to get a job straight away, or do you think it's important that they do try and further their academic education to some extent by at least going to college? Is that going to reduce the options that they have if they don't?
I don't think it reduce the options. I do like the idea that companies take young people on, but then support them to do something on day release. I'm not sure if that is a viable route directly from your last GCSE year. I'm not sure on that, but I think as we've discussed, there's much more push now for people to get the experience alongside the academics rather than just pure academics. And it's probably, you can set yourself on a good path very early and very young. And there is truly no obstacle to getting into the industry. Certainly, certainly in construction engineering, it is a very wide-ranging availability in jobs, and we're in desperate need for young people. Desperate need.
Okay. Yeah. For sure. A question that's come in here. Will any of the companies be doing any virtual work experience this year, or even practical work experience towards the end of this year? I mean, obviously, because of the situation we're in, the young people going onto sites, which I know, John, you've always been very keen to try and welcome and encourage. Clearly, that can't happen at the moment. Is that something that either of your organisations have spoken about, how you can create those sort of virtual experiences yet?
I'm not sure. I think, as far as I'm aware, our company is still planning on going ahead with ours at this time. I'm supposed to be one of the people in charge of organising that for the St Albans office, so I should probably find out. But as far as I'm aware, I haven't heard of any cancellations, or I would imagine if there are any issues, it would be done virtually, because a lot of the tasks that we do it's work experience we use as more of a taster to get and try out all the different fields that AECOM are a part of, because we're quite a wide-ranging company. So I don't see any reason why it couldn't be done digitally, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to commit one way or another and then be wrong, but I'd assume they're still going ahead.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
we'd be happy to go ahead. I think it comes down to the schools making risk assessments and seeing if it is safe to go ahead. But we would certainly support that.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, we've spoken about the site that you've got in Hoddesdon, which is the bridge going over Essex Road, was one that we were hoping prior to COVID that we were going to actually be able to open out, and students locally were going to be able to go for. Just touching on, Matthew, what are the most enjoyable aspects of being an engineer?
For me, I'd say the aspect I probably find most enjoyable is like the problem solving, like where you've really got to think, not necessarily technically, but more like, how am I going to get around this situation? I find those really interesting to think about and try and come up with ideas for. But also, obviously, like, the people in the industry are really great. But for some reason, at least in my department, they're very open to helping if you have any questions, any concerns. If you're worried you don't know enough, they're right there to support you. But it's also the kind of field where you're not going to be babied around for a lot of the time. You're going to be straight in on projects. You're going to be going on site. You're going to be running your own projects fairly quickly. It's definitely you're definitely supported and pushed through the ranks, maybe quickly, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I'll put another poll out there, which is asking, as we're starting to wrap up the conversation now, has any of the information you've been given today going to affect your choices of A level or your options post school? So if you haven't voted on that one, please just have a look at that one and decide which of those options best meets you. John, I guess the opposite question to the one that Matthew's just answered there. What are the challenging aspects of being an engineer, and who would this career not appeal to? So what's the sort of the warts and all that we should be sharing and discussing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I suppose some of the challenging aspects are what make it interesting as well. You can take it both ways. So all the projects we do in engineering are very bespoke. So you're hardly ever standing still. It's not a repetitive industry. Certainly in the construction side and probably Matthew's side, you're constantly doing different work and moving from project to project. So it's very changing and evolving environment. Teamwork is really important. So your communication, your interpersonal skills, that's challenging. There's a lot of conflict resolution and finding agreement and negotiation. I'd say, so if you don't like working in a team, it might not appeal to you. You've got to want to get things built and get things accurate. And as we've said, maths, science, physics, these are, if they're your thing, engineering's a good choice. I'd like to say as well that it's really quite exciting in this country, engineering at the moment, because we've got renewable energy and sustainability as a massive, massive thing for the future for young people to go into. Massive transport increases with HS2, tunnels, bridges, and then you've got driverless cars coming in the future. There's a real exciting time coming up in engineering for sure, and I'd recommend anyone going into it at this stage.
Definitely. I'm sure most people have read in the news that we're about to go across 2 months without using coal for power at all,
Yep.
which is just thinking like 5, maybe 6 years ago, we were still using 40% coal for energy generation. Like, it's come a long way very quickly already. And like, if we're meeting our 2050, 2030 targets, there's going to be a huge push in that direction.
Yeah.
Which
and carbon reduction. We've got carbon reductions and global warming to deal with. All these things are very hot topics, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Just going to fire through some questions that have come in. Now, if you perhaps try and answer these as briefly as we can, because there's quite a few to get through, and they're all really, really good questions. Some of them will reinforce some of the things we've perhaps discussed already. Here we go. Which type of engineering will help me if I want to build a career as an astronaut, an astrophysicist? Matthews, you.
Well, I would say I've got no idea for astronauts. I'd say maybe something more like astrophysics would be, which isn't engineering, but something like that, or maybe aerospace engineering. I've honestly got no idea. I know it's
okay.
definitely
all right. So
a very
good question.
Yeah.
Essentially. Which type of engineering is related to fire safety?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I know we have in AECOM a fire engineering department. I'm not sure if there is a course that is strictly fire engineering or what you have to do for that, but I know that career does exist. So I would guess we probably have information on our website, so I'd check there, but I've got no idea off the top of my head, sorry.
Structural engineering, probably that arena.
Yeah, probably that way.
Yeah, okay. Can you get into design engineering after sixth form by taking an apprenticeship? I don't know whether either of you would know that, because that's quite a specific question, very valid question.
After A level is when we'd want people at AECOM to be doing the apprenticeship. So if you've got your apprenticeship, and double thumbs up if you've got maths, I definitely inquire about it if you know which kind of design engineering you want to go into. If you want to focus more on transport, or if you want to focus more on like ground or environment engineering or whatever, if you know that, then you're set.
Okay, good. Matthews, when directed specifically at you, would you say that studying mechanical engineering at uni would be more beneficial if I want to work in the aircraft industry than aerospace engineering?
I mean, if you know and you're set on working in the aerospace industry and doing aeroplanes, I'd say go for that. But if you're not sure and you're just going at the moment, oh, well, I'll pick airplanes because they sound cool, but I'm not really sure, then I'd err on the side of caution and go mechanical, because you're going to be, either way, you're going to have a good basis to go in a different direction. But I think mechanical is just a bit more open for career changes.
Yeah. Okay, good. I picked biology, chemistry, maths for A level. Does this limit my options for engineering, such as mechanical and aerospace?
No,
I would have thought that's a pretty good breadth of subject level, isn't it, based on what you said so far?
Yeah, definitely. If you can, I would say, if you can flesh it out with stuff outside of school, stuff like if you like engineering or mechanical engineering, if you know specifically what kind of mechanical engineering, if you could do, I know at least when I was at A level, there was a thing called an extended project, if that still exists, and I don't know if it does, and you do it based on something that engineering related, that is always good. Or if you can find some other work experience or something, then you're pretty much set
Yeah.
with those set of A levels.
Okay, good. Another one about A levels. I think I can probably answer this one. Do you just need an A level in maths, or do you need, for example, 3 Cs? And I guess this entirely depends on which university you're applying for and their own specific demands, doesn't it? Is that the best way of answering that?
Yeah, it'll be university specific, or if you're going for an apprenticeship, company specific, I'd
Yeah.
expect.
Clearly, having A level maths, having a grade at it is going to be very beneficial for you. I'm just going to put up a final poll for you now, just as we rattle through the final few questions. So if you are still online and you can access this poll now, if you could just answer this final question here, which will be quite significant. It'll be very interesting to find out the results of this one. Matthew, what type of engineering would be most applicable for an aspiring pilot?
Oh, I would guess the same again, aerospace engineering, or if not, if you're still hesitant, go mechanical.
Yep. Okay. Oh, John, question for you here. Do projects ever fail? And if so, what are the consequences? Kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think we learn from failure. Engineering's drawn over many decades of success and failure, and best practice. I think that's the best way I can answer that. So far less nowadays. Aerospace engineering is a good example, which is probably the most safest form of travel, because the level of engineering is phenomenal in aerospace and aeroplane design.
Yeah, I would say even in our industry, for most projects, you'd end up looking at all the things that haven't gone quite right and use them as lessons learned, so that next time you streamline the process even further.
Yeah. Okay. Good answer. What areas would you both look into in order to improve sustainability when carrying out engineering projects?
Oh, I'm not sure. It kind of depends what field you're in. There's a whole wealth of knowledge out there. So if you know what you're looking to reduce, then there's loads of Googling and journal articles and all sorts that will give you ideas that you can then look into. I know in AECOM we have a specific sustainability department as well, who focus their entire time on, how can we make a project as sustainable as possible? So if that is really what you're into, then yeah, something like that is always useful.
Okay, very good. What if you're a bad drawer? Can you still design things?
Who needs drawing anymore?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now it's so much digitally now. So if you can, I'd say if anything, drawing doesn't matter. But if you can use like basic PDF editor, you're already like on a good track. All the like specific specialist programs will be taught to you on the job. So don't worry about learning AutoCAD or Revit or anything. Your company will easily be able to teach you all of those.
Okay, good. Does not picking physics affect my options in engineering? I'm guessing if you're doing maths, then probably that will give you a base layer, doesn't it?
Yeah. Physics is always good, but not essential.
Not essential. Again, look at perhaps some of the university courses that you might be looking at. I think that will be the best guide for you. Few questions that have come on. What would a person need to take to become a chemical engineer? So again, apart from maths, I mean, chemistry, is that sort of a given?
Yeah, I would guess so. Again, look at university courses. They'll have a list, and I imagine there'll even be university courses out there for people who haven't taken maths and just taken chemistry. It's definitely very open in that regard.
Yeah. Okay. What are the average working hours? John, on an average week, just take it out of COVID, how many hours a week are you on site, or are you planning and designing? And
well, I think all in the modern world, our hours are winding back a little bit. You know, life balance is the key. All companies out there, Matthew's company, my company, it's all about employees' happiness between their work life and their home life. And I'd say a typical 45-hour week, but nowadays, given what's just happened, working from home is becoming more prevalent, as you can see today. And so I think I wouldn't be worried about the hours. It's about people's talent and their output. That's the key to any young person. You know, you've got to get the job done. It's not how many hours you're sat at your desk.
Yeah, I would say it's
Yeah.
especially important if you can train your mind to think about it. Is it's not really how many hours you're working, because then you want to like minimize that. Think of it as more like every hour extra that you work, that's more experience that you've gained, and you're going to go further in your career. Obviously, there is busier times where you are working like 45, 50-hour weeks towards deadlines, but equally, then you'll have times where it's beginning of a project and there's not much on, and you're only doing 30 hours a week. It just really depends on how busy you are with projects. But if you can keep in the mindset of like, oh, I can work a bit later and help get this out, but I'm going to learn so much more from doing it, and then I think that's a lot better of a mindset to be in if you can get it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Right. You'll both be very pleased to hear that you've really inspired our audience, because I've had numerous emails or requests coming in for work experience, and how they can find out about work experience. John, is that something you could answer for us? I mean, let's assume that we're out of the COVID situation quite clearly. Any traditional work experience is going to be very difficult at the moment. But what should someone do if they're interested in gaining some work experience with Osborne?
There's nothing to stop people going on our website and sending emails into our company to ask that question. We as a site in Hoddesdon want to take on some work experience, so that's a direct sort of request to you, Gareth, to help us with that. Very willing to do that. Yeah, I think that's about my advice.
Okay, well, so I'd recommend that if any of you that live in the sort of Hoddesdon area or Broxbourne area, if you'd like to find out more about work experience, your teachers that would have put you in contact with giving you the details for this seminar, if you could ask them, and then they will have my contact details, and then I in turn can then forward on John's. Apologies, that's a bit of a truncated process to doing that, but that's probably the best way, just to make sure we're adhering to any safeguarding policies. Matthew, do you know what AECOM's work experience
well, I know for work experience, I'm not sure, but I know for my summer placement, I applied, online. My advice would be, until you get the answer no, don't stop pestering people. I know a lot of people, especially work at AECOM and the bigger firms, are very busy, and just because they haven't gotten back to you doesn't mean it's a no. It just means that their plate might be full. So if you haven't got a no, send them another email saying like, I'm sorry for pestering you, but have you considered letting me come? Because we do really appreciate having younger people come in, because it gives them such a good grounding for them going into other education to then come back and be better engineers at the start. It's definitely worth our time.
For sure. Okay. All right. Well, look, just to wrap up, just to conclude some of the things that we've spoken about this afternoon. First of all, if you want to go into engineering, there are different strands of engineering that you can go into. Matthew said that really is to underpin all your engineering studies that you might do. Doing maths at A level is really sort of quite significant and quite important, and then there are perhaps other science subjects that you may well want to consider as well. But it's important that you, have a look through some university prospectuses, have a look at some companies that maybe employ apprentices, and just get an idea for them, a year, 2 years in advance of the sorts of subjects that specifically that they're looking for. So that's important. Engineering is one of several industries now where there's really credible routes, whether you want to go through the degree route as Matthew has done and become a graduate, or whether you want to become an apprentice and going through an apprenticeship route, which realistically will probably be after A levels, but there may well be some companies that can offer you some programs starting from 16 after your GCSE levels. The websites that I would encourage you to go and have a look at would be our Hop Into program, which is a sort of one-stop shop really, and you can find all sorts of information both specifically about engineering and some of the vacancies and courses that are available, and that will be specific to Hertfordshire. That's just going up on the screen now, so that's hopinto.co.uk. That's also where the QR code that you can see on that screen as well. If you take a picture of that, that's going to take you directly to our virtual encounters page on there. So this video will be available on there, as well as previous ones that we've done as well, which have been on physiotherapy, on life sciences. Next week, we've got one on, we've got a junior doctor talking to us. And then in 2 weeks' time, we'll be looking at construction as an industry, of which there will be some crossover from engineering. So have a look at that one. The other website I encourage you to have a look at if you want to find out more about apprenticeships is a company called Amazing Apprenticeships. If you Google Amazing Apprenticeships there, that really will tell you everything you need to know about apprenticeships, and there will be links in there so that you can see any live vacancies that are available at the moment. Even if you're not looking to apply for one right now, just to do a bit of background knowledge and to find out for the future what they look like, and there's some really good information about both of those as well. Matthew and John spoke about some of the underlying skills and qualities that an engineer would be, regardless of the qualifications that you've got, which we spoke about being problem solving, being a really important one, and being able to work in part of a team is absolutely crucial. There's very few aspects of engineering that don't require people to work in a team. So having an ability to do that is really, really important. There's been some really, really fantastic questions that have come in today. The results from the polls that you've submitted indicate that you found this session really useful as well, which is fantastic. So hopefully between John and Matthew, they've inspired quite a few of you watching live, and those of you watching subsequently, that engineering is a really, really fantastic career option to explore into some further details. I really hope that you found it useful. Thank you so much to John and to Matthew and Osborne and AECOM respectively for allowing you to give up your time to talk to everybody today. So we'll be ending the broadcast now. Hopefully you might want to come back and watch it again, and you can find some of that key information that we've discussed today. But best of luck to all of you watching today, and hopefully you can pursue some really good careers in engineering as a result of it. So thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.